John McMullen at JF McMullen. You heard him last night as part of Mosher, McMullen, and Krause. Thursday nights, 97.3 ESPN. And every day right here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN as the Eagles going to have a couple of running backs out. Jay Ajayi out along with Darren Sproles. Corey Clement is questionable for the game. We'll get the latest on those developments and more with John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. John, how are you?
Doing well. How are you guys?
Doing excellent. As we see the injury reports come out on the Friday edition here, Jay Ajayi, not much of a surprise. Darren Sproles, not much of a surprise. Corey Clement, questionable, but looks like he's going to play. But is there some concern with both Ajayi and Sproles out for this game? Now, Ryan and I had a little debate on this. He thinks it's
listen,
he's a little concerned, and I told him to calm down a little bit.
It's running back by committee. If your argument was it's better if he was getting 25 carries and then next man up, but the fact that Doug uses three different guys, they get 8 to 12 carries each. The defense doesn't know when they're getting who. Now 2/3 of your running back by committee is down, and it's all on Clement and an unknown Smallwood and Adams. I mean, I'm not just going to pretend that there's nothing to that. Am I right or wrong there, John?
No, there's something to it. I mean,
I didn't discount that there was something to it.
No,
I'm not panicking.
I know.
Yeah, well, I agree with both of you. There is something to it, and I wouldn't panic. And in fact, I'm kind of looking forward to see what Corey can do with added touches, because I think in a lot of ways he might be the best back on this team. But until he does it, you have to see him prove it. So I think there's a possibility that they actually improve a little bit with him handling the football more. But you're right. I mean, Doug Peterson, I talk about it all the time about how he defaults to Darren Sproles in key situations. He's not going to be there again, and Jay's the lead back in the committee. He's not going to be there. And then when you add in all the issues at receiver, I mean, the reality is that the skill position players don't look very good on paper for this particular week for the Eagles. So I understand why people are concerned. I'm still more concerned about the receivers than the running backs, but that's because I have a lot of confidence in Corey Clement.
Yeah, and that's something like I said. I was more concerned with the receiving situation and a little bit, mainly because in this league, John, running backs is a plug-and-play position. I mean, guy goes down, some guy you never heard of comes in, he runs for 120 yards, rest is the same old story, plug-and-play another guy. And Sproles wasn't here last year, so I don't feel like that's – I get what you're saying. They lean on him when he's here, but he wasn't here last year. So I feel like they're used to game planning without him. I like what Corey brings to the table. I think they'll be all right there. My question is there a difference to you between being rusty and the timing being off?
Yeah, there's a difference. And I think you're going to see both. Because I think Carson's going to be rusty, and I think the timing's not going to be there as well. For a number of reasons, and partially just because he hasn't had a ton of time since the regular season began with the first team in practice. This is the first week. Obviously, he's taking first-team reps. And then you have Jordan Matthews coming back. They're very close off the field, but that doesn't really help your chemistry on the field, and the fact that he hasn't been here. So, yeah, I mean, there's something to it, and I think both things are going to be a work in progress. And similarly, on the other side, with the Colts, they've had the same types of issues with Andrew Luck because he hasn't played in a really long time, and they've been fighting through that the first 2 weeks.
The one thing with and we've kind of had the debate about whether he'll be rusty. I said my concern is more just the timing because some of these guys, although he's played with Matthews, he's played with Agholor, he's played with Ertz, so I don't even know. He just hasn't had the game speed with them because for me, I don't know how rusty the guy basically did everything in training camp, did everything in minicamp other than play in preseason games, which half the league's not even doing anymore anyway.
Well, I agree with that, but half the league is also calling these first two games sort of glorified preseason games. Brandon Graham did that. He said this is like the preseason for me because he didn't play in any of the games in August. So NFL teams are doing that for a reason, to keep players healthy, because they've done sort of the cost-benefit thing and realized that, look, you don't have the time you once had in the old days to prepare anyway, so you might as well get to week one as healthy as possible. That's what they've decided generally across the league. But there's rust. There's rust all over the place. And one of the reasons there is because the guys don't play in August. There's going to be rust. This guy hasn't played in an NFL game since December 10th of last year. I mean, you can't replicate the speed of an NFL game in practice. You do your best, you try, but even Carson has admitted that you can't do it until you get out there.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. That's where I say the timing, because you can't get the speed of the game, and that's where the timing, like he might be throwing balls to Jordan Matthews and Nelson Agholor in practice, but that game speed's a little different than what he's doing in practice. But I think, John, and maybe I'm on an island here, I think this is the kind of game where in the past with Nick, they win the game because they balance it. A bunch of guys kind of contribute. I think when Carson's there, when you say, why did they win the game? Because they had Carson Wentz. I feel that's what the answer will be on Sunday. Why did they win the game? Because they had Carson Wentz.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. I said it yesterday on the show we did and said Carson just makes the offense better. That's just he's a lot better than Nick Foles. And I know some people don't want to hear that, but that's the reality, and that's what he does. He's one of a select few of this league who steps on the field and makes everybody else better, and that's a good thing this week because we're still in sort of waiting mode. You're going to wait another week, even though he's listed as questionable. Alshon Jeffrey's not going to play this week, and Nelson Agholor's kicked outside more. Jordan Matthews is going to play. We'll see how much. You just mentioned all the issues at running back. Tight end outside Zach Ertz is still a work in progress. Not a lot of big play ability on this team right now outside the quarterback position. So while I say you're going to see some rust, which I believe you are, you're going to see some hiccups. You're also going to see the other side of it, and he's just so good. He's going to make something out of nothing at some point in this game, and that's going to be big, and that's going to be an improvement for the Eagles.
We talk about all the issues and injuries that the Eagles are dealing with, but on the other side of the ball, John, the Colts are banged up too. I mean, how do you expect the Eagles to game plan and attack that Colts offense, who's short on players as well?
Yeah, they're banged up almost just as much, and they don't have as much talent to start from, so that's number one. They're starting to go in the right direction. But offensively, I mean, all you have to do is look. I think they have 3 plays this year in the first 2 games of more than 20 yards. They're not exactly throwing lightning strikes at people as well. It does look like T.Y. Hilton's going to play, so that will help. But they... when you look at their players, they're not going to strike fear in anybody as well, except for the quarterback. And he's had an even longer rehab than Carson Wentz. Now, he's also been back, and this will be his 3rd game as opposed to Carson's first. But they're still a work in progress that way as well. And a lot of what the Colts are going to have to accomplish, we've seen the difference in the Eagles' defense versus on being at home versus on the road. They tend to dominate at Lincoln Financial Field. So if the Colts are going to do anything, it's going to have to be sort of that off-schedule offense we always talk about with Carson, but with Andrew Luck.
You wrote today at 973ESPN.com, what's old is new again, and that's meaning that they need Nelson Agholor to play on the outside. Now, what's old was he was on the outside. What was really old was he wasn't very good out there. How much of that is he's not a good guy, a good performer at that position, or how much of that is he's now more confident and that maybe he can be a good outside guy. I heard you last night on the Mosher McMullen show that, that he's better in the slot. I think we've all kind of said that, but are we saying that because he was just performed better? Maybe his confidence level is up that he can perform on the outside.
Well, I do think it will be better than what it was before because he's a much more confident player. He's not questioning himself. I do think that you're going to see an uptick in performance than when he was out there his first 2 years, and that's good because it wasn't good, as you mentioned. However, hey, he's not an outside receiver in this league. I've said it a lot. I will continue to say it. Now, people look at his athleticism, and this is what I kind of talked about with Jeff yesterday. There's no question he can run. There's no question that he can scare a defense with his speed and his athleticism. But if you look at the great deep threats in the history of the game, that's part of the equation. The bigger part, and you see this with Deshaun Jackson, the best I've ever seen at it is Randy Moss. They track the football on the air at a phenomenal level that not a lot of guys can do. That is the weakness of Nelson Agholor's game. The absolute weakness of his game is tracking the football in the air. He's a guy that needs to catch it and then sort of make something after the catch, the yards after catch. That's his wheelhouse. Taking a 50-yard pass down the field, he's never been good at that, and I don't think that's changing.
Yeah, I see what you mean. When the ball is in the air, getting himself adjusted and tracking it and making the proper adjustments in mid-flight sometimes, as opposed to just running, turning, and having that ball stick to your numbers and then making your moves afterwards.
Exactly, and the latter is what Nelson does really well. The former, as I said, it's not his wheelhouse. It's not his skill set. It's not what he does best. And the Eagles know that. And that's why when they built this thing, he was the slot receiver and Mike Wallace was supposed to be the deep threat. Unfortunately, injuries have come into play, and it's not only Mike Wallace, because if Mike gets hurt and Mac Hollins is still here, he steps up and steps into that role. As a 6'4" guy who can run, who was a deep threat in college, but he's on the injured reserve as well. So now you're forced into a position to go out on the street, get some help. What you're able to get is Jordan Matthews, because you have to get him ready from Wednesday to be ready to play on Sunday. So you need somebody who's familiar with the offense. I agree with that, but the reality is he can't be an outside receiver, so you have to put him in the slot, and that kicks Nelson outside. That's not optimal.
What do you anticipate? What do you expect? How much burn will Jordan Matthews, how big of a part of the offense will he be?
I think quite a bit. I really do. I think he knows the offense, obviously, and the other options, Kamar Aiken, Shelton Gibson, are just not players that the Eagles would prefer to throw out there for 50 snaps. Now, a lot of it depends on how Jordan is physically, because remember, he's been on the street. He hasn't been with another team and just cut. So I don't know if he's capable of going out there for, say, 50 plays from a physical standpoint, but if he is, they'll probably want him out there for 50 plays.
John, what have you seen from the Colts defense? I saw you ask Doug this at the presser. Is this a matchup that favors the Eagles, how the Colts play defensively, or is this something that could be concerning for them? What are your thoughts on the Colts from the defensive side and how that favors the Eagles?
Well, I don't know if it favors the Eagles because of all the issues they have that we just discussed. It's kind of hard when you don't have playmakers to say it's a good matchup against any team. So until Alshon is back, until Jay Ajayi's healthy, Darren Sproles is clicking on all cylinders, and maybe they figure out the deep threat on the offensive side of the football, and Carson gets more comfortable. Maybe down the line we can talk about advantages. But what it is it's not the Jaguars, it's not the Vikings, it's not the Bears, it's not a top 5 defense that's going to completely dominate you. So from that standpoint, yeah, it's good to go in and get a defense that doesn't have a ton of playmakers on paper because you're dealing with so many issues on the offensive side of the ball.
What are the key matchups then? What are the keys to the Eagles offense to really get going then?
I think, and I said on the show, I think Corey Clement's ultimately going to get in the end zone twice. And I picked the Eagles to win this game 24-14. And they're going to have to score some points, and maybe they do it by getting a turnover on a short field or something of that nature. But, I mean, the reality is you have what you have on the offensive side of the ball. Corey's got to be the guy from the running back position, and then it's got to be Zach Ertz and a little Nelson Agholor mixed in as receivers. So anytime you're talking about your tight end as your best receiver, you're not exactly stressing the team down the football field. It's always, until Alshon gets back, until people get healthy, it's always going to be Zach and Nelson. That's the strength of this team right now. And I don't know if you can look at that and say, even on the team with the Colts, their 2 best defensive players, Malik Hooker, probably at least two most talented. And then you have Leonard, who's AFC Defensive Player of the Week, 2nd-round pick this year, had a great week last week against Washington. They're really athletic guys, so I don't know if you look at it and say it's an advantage. Mm-hmm. But again, it's not the dominant defense that's going to completely stifle you.
Yeah, Mike Wells described them as fast, tough, and physical when he talked about their defense. Now, he said they're young. They got a lot of young guys out there, but they're fast, they're tough, they're physical. He also mentioned with Anthony Costanzo out, he said, if I'm the Eagles, I'm looking to feast on that spot right there. Could this be the week that Jim Schwartz's front 4 there, however many guys he rotates, causes havoc in this game? This is a team, the Colts perpetually don't run the ball very well.
Yeah, I mean, they will cause havoc, and the Colts are getting there on the offensive line, but as you mentioned, Costanzo's out. Now, look, they got a first-round pick from center to left tackle. And those guys are really, really talented. And Quentin Nelson, I hate to give out guarantees about rookie players, but I'm going to guarantee he's going to be a Pro Bowl player in this league. Ryan Kelly at center, those 3 are really, really talented. Obviously, you don't have one. And on the other side, they're not nearly as good. And I think I told you about Brandon Graham when he was asked about the right tackle who played in college with Carson Wentz. And we asked him if Carson gave him any tips, and he didn't even know they played together in college. And then we said, well, what do you see from on the film? And Brandon just said, it's going to be a good day. And he just gave that Brandon Graham chuckle.
I like that.
And he gave yeah, they have a huge edge. And the difference between what they're capable of doing at home versus on the road, we've seen it time and time again. That front is going to have a big day, I think, against the Colts.
All right, real quick, John McMullen, a couple quick hits around the league. John gave his pick. He likes the Eagles 24-14 over Indianapolis.
By the way, I picked the perfect score last week. I just had the wrong winner.
Oh, all right. Well, we'll give you the ding. How's that?
No ding.
You don't get a ding for that.
No.
You got the inverse score correctly. There you go. You're in. All right. What'd you think last night? Obviously, we talked about there was some interest in the game, some intrigue. It was the highest-rated Thursday night game in 3 seasons on the standalone Thursday night NFL Network game. People came and watched Mayfield, Darnold. It was a fun game, and the Browns finally get off the snide there after a year and a half.
Yeah, it was. It wasn't shaping up to be a fun game until poor Tyrod Taylor went down with a concussion. But
will we see Tyrod Taylor again?
No. Obviously, barring injury. But I don't know why people were criticizing Hugh Jackson. You say a player's not going to be a starter is just concussed. You want to talk to him personally. You don't announce that kind of stuff through the media. So I have no idea why people were taking shots at him for that. But obviously Baker Mayfield gave that team some juice, and it's going to be interesting because, remember, the Jets didn't game plan for him. And also, they were behind the Browns. And because they were behind, they played tempo. And that's what Baker does well. So I think it's going to be interesting to watch him moving forward as teams start game planning for him, and he's got to scale it back and run a more traditional offense because he can't go Chip Kelly 60 minutes a game and just tempo. So there's still some questions to be answered, but that Browns team is pretty clear is finally heading in the right direction. They could be 3-0. They really could. If they had a field goal kicker earlier, and you take a look at that Steelers game, and in a lot of ways they should be 3-0.
Yeah. Giants are going on the road, 0-2 versus 0-2. Houston is, I thought Houston last week probably should have won the game down in Tennessee, but they're at home here. The Giants on the road. How do you see that?
Well, a lot of people are panicking in Houston because many thought that might be a playoff team. So they have some significant talent. On the other hand, the Giants do not. The Giants are the Giants. I gave them too much credit. I think you just saw now Sam Darnold obviously had his struggles, but in general, the Jets are thrilled that they were able to get him. And you saw Baker Mayfield last night, and the New York Giants are still trotting out Eli Manning. That will haunt them and haunt them and haunt them until they get a quarterback in that situation. They're a disaster, and they're going to continue to be a disaster.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. Real quick, Dallas going to Seattle. Tough spot for them. Seahawks haven't won.
Yeah, no, Bobby Wagner back, and I think KJ Wright back as well. So they'll be a little bit different. They were awful against Chicago, but it's the Cowboys are an interesting team because we typically think about them and talk about their offense in the past with whether it was Ezekiel Elliott, DeMarco Murray before that, when Jason Witten was there, when Dez was there, and they were playing at a high level, and they never had a defense. Now it's the exact opposite. They have a defense, and they have no offense. So I think it's going to be tough to get a beat on the Cowboys each and every week because you never know if they're going to be able to generate anything. Seattle's kind of in the same boat with a bad offensive line. That's still a really, really difficult place to play. So you got to kind of default to Seattle. All
right. Washington's at home. They're getting Green Bay, though. I don't know what to think about with Green Bay because I'm not sure Rodgers is 100%. And I'm not saying that matters wholeheartedly because he's still better than anybody. I think the reason they haven't made the switch is because they know if they do, their season's over. Every time he's out, they go to they tank. So they're going to ride him as long as he can stand on 2 feet.
You're right, and the guy's amazing. He doesn't practice. He didn't practice again this week. He'll practice on Saturday, and he'll play the game, and he'll be the best quarterback in the NFL. And that's what he was last week, and they tied with Minnesota. There's not enough adjectives to describe how good he is. And, yeah, I mean, they're going to beat the Redskins. And he's playing with a sprained MCL, which should keep him out 4 to 6 weeks. He doesn't practice at all. It's amazing what he does. They're a Super Bowl contender without him. With him, without him, they're a 4-win team. That's a pretty drastic roller coaster, and that tells you how good he is.
All right, John McMullen, of course, here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, as who will be there on Sunday for Eagles Colts. Follow him on Twitter at JF McMullen on his game day tweets. And, of course, every day right here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. John, thanks, pal.
Hey, thank you, guys.